Hello everybody. This morning I'm going to be talking about Easy Chair, Abolish High School by Rebecca Solnit, but we're actually going to start back in Harold Bloom's. Like I said, Harold Bloom and his writing is really the framework. It's the framework that we're going to be using when we consider all of the different reading that you're doing, from the essays in the folder to the books that you're reading. We're going to be thinking about Harold Bloom. And what is a big deal to Harold Bloom, and you can tell by the way that his essay is structured, is when he gets to this fifth principle, which is the recovery of the ironic. And this is the most difficult principle to understand. And you can tell that it's important to him because if you look over here, he's talking about his second principle here, his third principle and his fourth principle come in pretty quick succession. Then he gets to this fifth principle, and he spends a couple pages talking about it. All of this page here is about the ironic, and this page right here. So I'm going to read this paragraph, which is at the end of the section he's talking about about irony, and then I'm going to use this as the jumping off point to get into Abolish High School, which is an argument. So irony demands a certain attention span, the ability to sustain antithetical ideas. So antithetical ideas are kind of two opposites. So it's the idea that you can have two opposite ideas in your brain at the same time, even when they collide with one another. And we're going to talk about that with respect to Solnit's argument. Strip away irony from reading, and it loses at once all discipline and all surprise. So now he's going to go back to his big statement. He's made it several times in this essay. Find now what comes near to you that can be used for weighing and considering. And very likely, it very likely will be irony. So he's saying that that the most valuable learning that happens, or this idea where you expand yourself and make yourself bigger that he's so excited about, and I'm excited about too, is that the good stuff is probably going to be found in the form of irony. So it's good to have an idea of what irony is, and so now I'm going to explain what that is a little bit for this, and I'm going to do it by drawing a picture. So let's see how I can do here. Let's just draw our generic ninth grader here. Oh, there you are. You look pretty happy, maybe a little bit confused. You know, that's good, because that's how you learn. And I'm going to demonstrate this principle of irony. Irony is when you have the two things going on. You have what you expect and what actually happens. That's a simple way to explain what irony is. And in this case, the irony is not something that just exists in books, you know, where you read a book and you go, oh, there's irony, I found it. You can actually find it in life. And in fact, this is a real life example of irony right now in this moment. Because you hold this essay in your hand, you can say, that's kind of ironic. This is kind of irony because my English teacher, who is a teacher at my high school, is giving me an essay about abolishing high school, right? That's not really what you would expect. So it's like in your brain, you have one little cloud over here that's like, Mr. Liu is a high school teacher. All right, so probably he, since it's his job, he would probably have like a high opinion of what high school is, because that's what he does for his job, right? So you could say probably he likes high school. You could say you'd hope so, right? If you had a teacher who didn't like school, that would not be very fun for anybody. So here's one idea that you've got in your brain, right? You've got that in your brain. But there's also this idea that, he gave me and wants me to think about abolishing high school, getting rid of it. So the idea is that both of these things are true, but they're not what you would expect. And so the irony is when you put these two things together in your brain. And according to Bloom, this is where you grow. Okay? So now I'm going to go over some of the highlights of the essay. I'm going to show you what I thought was important in reading it. First of all, this first sentence here is a short And this is a great word that you could learn. Pith. It's what we call a pithy sentence. A pithy sentence, and Kurt Vonnegut would really love pithy sentences. They are short sentences that have a lot of impact. She didn't waste any words in this first sentence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words. I didn't go to high school, which has a lot of impact, and it really sets up her whole argument because you can tell she's a pretty smart person, and she's saying, I didn't go to high school. It's the very first thing that she says. And then she goes on to explain herself. She lets you know a little bit about herself, what she was like. She was withdrawn. She was not an extrovert. She was an introvert. She did not have a good time, like a lot of you, right? She was forced to do a lot of things that she didn't feel like really helped her. In the end, she was able to go to an alternative high school, then pass her GED at 15, go to community college, and then to a 4-year college. So she's someone who went to college, she's educated, but she just didn't do the traditional route. She talks about what high school means. Let's go in here and see. This idea that the definition would have imposed on me. High school has a lot of power. To impose something is to put something on someone. Put something onto or into, right? So we're defined somehow. So what she's constructed here is an argument for thinking differently about high school. And the first thing that she talks about, and I just kind of, as I was reading, I circled things that I thought were important, but then as I started to figure out what her argument was in pieces, I kind of separated the pieces out. And this one is a big one where she talks about suicide, she talks about mental health, she talks about bullying in high school, and she's trying to get the reader, right? The reader for this are probably not high school students. The reader for this are educated adults. She's trying to help the reader develop a sense of empathy or understanding with teens. So she talks about the prevalence of mental health problems. 16% of high school students have considered committing suicide, and that's a really frightening statistic, right? And so she's wondering if there's something about high school that could influence that statistic in a negative way. We think that adolescence is inherently ridden with angst, right? You know, because angst is kind of like this undefinable anger. You know, it's like a unhappiness and anger all put together with not like a specific reason. It's just kind of there. A lot of times teenagers are accused of being full of angst. 28% of public school students and 20% of private schools report being bullied. And though inner cities kids are routinely portrayed as the highest as menace, the highest proportion of bullying is in white kids in non-urban areas. So this is a surprising fact, right? So that's supporting her argument. Why should children be confined to institutions in which these experiences are so common? So she's talking about the relationship between bullying and mental health and saying, wait a minute, if we understand that these things happen in high school, why are we forcing everyone to go into something like that? Then she moves on to her second point, which has to do with generational segregation, which is the idea that high schools force young people into being in these age-specific groups. And she's really asking us to consider why. Like, we think it's natural to take every kid and say, okay, you're all 14, you should all be together. But maybe that's not the best way to do things. She's talking about, well, let's see the quote here. But those going through the same life experiences at the same time often have little to teach one another about life. So she's saying if you've got a bunch of people and they're all going through all the changes that are associated with adolescence, maybe it's not the best idea to put them all together because maybe they're not really equipped to help others if they're going through such a challenging time themselves, which I thought was just an interesting point. Most of us are safer in our youth in mixed age groups, and the more time we spend outside our age cohort, that means with people who are different ages than us, the broader our sense of selves. I underline that because that made me think of Bloom, because when he talks about reading, he says the whole purpose of reading is to broaden your sense of yourself. Okay, Okay, teenagers can act differently outside his or... So this is talking about that peer group. So we're forcing, the way that high school is currently configured in school in general, we force students into groups of people where they're the same age. But she's talking about that that those peer groups can really put a lot of pressure on people, and pressure that they might not need. And this is something that this is my thinking here that comes out of this, and I feel this is very true, is that teens, particularly teenagers, they feel like their peer groups are the entire world. You know, like every breakup, every relationship, every time somebody says something about you on Facebook, if it comes from a peer, it is like the biggest, most important thing that will ever happen to anyone in the history of humanity. And I wonder if that pressure is increased by the way that we put you together in school, and if it would help if we didn't, right? These are just ideas, right? She goes on. This is a really important point here. On the other side of the spectrum, people who have really good high school experiences might think that, like, just because they were successful and popular in high school, that will work for their whole life. And it's sad because it doesn't, right? Because high school is just a snapshot. It's just a period in your life. It is not your whole life. Part of the shared legacy of high school is bemused stories about people who were treated as demigods, like as the chosen, at 17 and never recovered. They were treated as though the qualities that made them popular should have effortlessly floated them through life. And that goes back to our growth mindset. So these are the reasons that I chose this for you, because it really fits in with a lot of the things. And we want you to think about your future. And so anyways, it's just talk about abolishing high school, you know. But I thought that this irony was something that helped me grow when I put these two ideas together, that I love high school, that I love helping high school kids, but at the same time, maybe the system that we have doesn't really serve their ends. And so this actually helped me think better, and I think that when I encounter things that help me think better, I should share them with you, because we're all thinking together.